Welcome to Southern New Hampshire University, Walker Auditorium, and to hopefully, I think, I've been excited for this night for a really long time, a great presentation by somebody that I found out about when I was on a run one morning. One of the things I like to do is I like to go running, and I found Randy's name through my friend Nicole, who had sat through one of his presentations, and she was so moved in her story telling me about him that we had this moment, and I was like, he has to come to campus. He has to come here, and he has to talk to our students, our faculty, our staff. We wanted to open it up to the public to just make sure that anybody who wanted to be here could be here tonight. So I'm really excited. Welcome. Randy is going to take the microphone. He doesn't really need much introduction. I'm going to let him tell you his story. And so, Randy, I'm going to turn it over to you.
All right. Autumn, hop up. Good girl. Left, left. Autumn, hop up. All right. Hi there.
Hi, Randy.
Thank you.
There you go.
All right. Well, good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
So, Autumn, hop up. We're not going to let you lay there. Come on. So, you know, spring's here tomorrow. It's March 19th, so spring is tomorrow. And Autumn, hop up, girl. Hop up. Autumn is going to come up here and celebrate her last day of influence, I think. She's going to take a nap as well. I hope you won't follow her inspiration, right? I'll try to do my part and be appropriately interesting and have some worthy material to share with you. So thank you for welcoming us to campus today. And, you know, I want to give a welcome to those listening by live feed or maybe by recording eventually. And, you know, I think it's ironic that I'm often invited to speak, and one of the first things people want me to do is share a little vision. And as a blind guy, that really feels ironic to me. But that is precisely what I'm going to do. All right. I have three objectives here. I want to share a little vision. I want to share a little bit with you on how I think we can use adversity as a catalyst in our lives. And I want to share a little bit with you about the concept of choosing the right response, on how we can use motivation and teamwork and communication to maybe bring out in ourselves a little more than we thought, to reach our peak potential. Now, to share that, I kind of want to start with my journey in this world, which is that I was fully sighted when I started this journey. You know, I started in Nashua, New Hampshire, grew up in Colebrook, New Hampshire, and so the bookending the state, obviously, and settling in here not quite in the middle. But all that time I was fully sighted, and I loved to be invested in life. I loved to be active and doing. I played every sport. I was in band, chorus, drama club, scouts. The truth of the matter is, anything that kept me from doing homework, that's what I wanted to be doing. Now, fortunately, right, we live and we learn and we grow, and I started doing some homework as well. And I also started, you know, understanding why I did those things. And a couple of key reasons. First off, what's fun? That's right. I wanted to learn what was fun. What did I enjoy? I wanted to learn what I was good at and what I needed to work on, what I needed to practice. I wanted to learn how to work with others. And the thing that is often overlooked, but became a very important skill in my life, is how to help others work with me. Because that's going to be an essential part of teamwork. Right? Teamwork is this notion I'm going to talk a lot about. It's an acronym, team. Together, everyone achieves more. But that's only true when you work together. When you get in each other's way, well, that disruption, you almost end up better off alone. And I don't think you are better off alone. I think you're better off learning how to work together so you can accomplish more. Now, that said, I kept that same philosophy all through school, all through college, and it was very rewarding for me in many ways. I had a great job. I worked at Digital Equipment, not too far away from here, as a hardware design engineer. I'm sure most of your public speakers are hardware design engineers. And as I had been at the job for a year, my life changed really dramatically. And a lot of people at the time thought, you know, one of the worst things that could possibly happen to me. And the truth is, at the time, I thought it was one of the worst things that could happen to me as well. It's not how I feel now, and we're going to discuss that as we go forward. But what happened is in just 2 weeks, I lost all of the sight in my right eye, and half of the sight in my left eye, just closed into this tunnel vision. And so with that little bit of vision, I was in the hospital for about 2 months as they were trying to understand what happened. Right? In my case, my optic nerve, the wire between my eye and my brain, was dying. And they didn't know then, they didn't know for quite a few years what caused it. What I have is a unique mitochondrial disease. And it causes lots of my nerves to die. But even at that time, what they knew is I was legally blind, and I didn't even know what that term meant. Right? I had my opinion of what I thought it meant. I thought it meant I would never do anything fun or anything meaningful in my life ever again. And if I stayed with that mentality, that's probably what my life would have been about. And fortunately, for a lot of reasons, that's not where I stayed. But what my doctors also suspected is that I would lose the rest of my sight. It was just going to take a matter of time. And they were correct again. It took 7 episodes and 11 years before I went totally blind, or I like to joke now that I must be illegally blind, right, since I'm well beyond legally blind. But that part wasn't as hard as the first transition, that transition to legal blindness. And the interesting reasons why are part of what I want to share, is what did I have to learn to take the frustration and the fear and really the doubt in myself and make it easier as I went forward. It's the notion that going blind really was harder than being blind. And I just had to learn that along the way. Right? And my condition didn't stop there, right? Because it doesn't just attack my optic nerves. It attacks other nerves. It attacked my cerebellum, which is your balance center. So I spent 1 year, 8 months, and 21 days also in a wheelchair. And I share that with you, one, because it tells you how I felt about it. It was hard being blind and in a wheelchair, right? And I also share it with you because I want you to understand how low I had to go on my journey. And there were a couple of other challenges, but really what I want to talk about is this isn't a pity story. I love my life. I do some incredible things, and I want to share that with you as we go forward. But I want you to understand how high I was able to climb, how high I think any of us can climb if we simply learn to start choosing the right response to the adversity we face. And that said, I'm going to ask Stephanie if you'll flip slide for me, and I'm going to share with you that first off, I mean it literally when I say, right? Life with Quinn, right? But it's not just the actual visuals, which I obviously understand very well. There's some messages in this photo that I also love. First off, in order to reach our peak potential, the figurative, the best we can be, or the literal, the mountaintops, sometimes we need a little guidance. Right? In my life, obviously, my guide dogs provide some of that guidance, but it's not just my dogs. There's people around my life that at times I choose to help guide me in lots of different ways. And how we choose our guides and how we allow them to guide us, as well as the times that we choose to do the guiding. Right? For the next hour, I get to do a little bit of guiding for you. And I hope I'm going to share some things that as you choose to use or apply them may have some benefit in your own world as you go forward. Right? So learning when to guide and when to accept guidance is an important lesson. And the very notion of mountains right there. I love the notion of mountains as challenge, as adversity. Without challenge in our life, we stagnate. And I think about that word. I don't even like the sound of that word. That sounds like something unpleasant on the top of a pond somewhere I don't want to be. Stagnation. I want to grow. I want to learn. I mean, that's the whole theme of a college campus, but that should be the whole theme of our lives, is looking for the opportunities to grow and learn. And challenge is one of the ways that you bring that out. Right? Blindness was certainly a challenge that I could have, when confronted with it, chose to quit and say, this is too hard. This is too frustrating. Why did this happen to me? And the truth is, I did say all of those things. And I did take some time sulking. But as soon as I started saying different questions of, well, what can I do? What do I want to do? And how can I do it? I started finding out that there were answers to those questions. And that there really was a lot more meaning and potential. The first lesson I had to learn was believing in myself. Henry Ford has this marvelous quote that I love to share as my first step on any part of my journey, which was, whether you think you can or whether you think you can't, you're probably right. And I love that notion, right? If you don't think you can, it makes it awful hard to succeed. But once you start saying, I can, I do believe in myself, I do believe in what I want to do, it gets a lot easier to succeed. You're on that journey. But it's not magic. It's not believe, achieve, you're done. There's some ingredients, right? Those main ingredients usually are problem solving and persevering. And I'm going to talk about those as we go forward a little bit. But first, I want to talk about those goals right away. That adversity notion, that challenge, right? I like to think that adversity doesn't have to be negative. We so often think of it as that negative catalyst. But what if we had positive adversity? Those are just words. Sometimes people don't like the word goal because it intimidates them. But a goal is a positive adversity, an objective. Call it what you want. Those are the semantic aspects. When there's something you want in your life that's positive and you strive to reach it, you're more likely to get it. And the thing is to understand that the confidence is the first step. I like to think there's 3.5 good reasons to set goals. I'm going to give you the 3 right away. I'll share the half before we're done the slideshow today. But the first good reason is if it's positive, you're more likely to get something you want in your life. So that's a good thing. The second reason that I believe in setting goals is there's an expression that I often hear, practice makes perfect. And I don't subscribe to that expression. I like so much better to hear the expression, practice makes progress. One, I don't know how to measure perfect, and I certainly can't reward along the way. Progress I can measure. I can see as we step towards the goal each step along the way. And I do know that the more I practice, the better I get. I certainly don't think I ever reach perfection, but I absolutely believe that I can improve and watch that if I practice. And it also means that when I practice reaching goals, I get better at reaching goals. So my second reason is, if you choose to set goals and reach for them, you're going to get more skills, more tools to use to help you reach those goals in the future. Whether they're small goals in your life or big goals, every one of those helps you prepare for those future things. And that leads me to my third reason, which I think is perhaps the most important of all, right? Best for last. And some people think of it semantically, but it is far more than semantics. If you choose to do those things and you build the skills to reach more goals, you are preparing yourself to handle the other kind of adversity, the negative adversity, and that gives you the confidence. The third reason is about the confidence you build in your life, to be able to say yes to things, to choose opportunity. And that confidence is how you deal with doubt and uncertainty. Confidence is the method of overcoming that. And confidence comes from the demonstrable use of those skills. And that confidence lets you approach the world in a different way. And that's how I went from the person who said, I can't do anything. Well, you try little things, and you see your success, and you grow from there. And in my case, I went from thinking I could do nothing fun or meaningful to somebody who climbs all these mountains. And I've climbed all over the world, right? I've hiked Kilimanjaro, the tallest standalone mountain in the world. I've hiked in the Andes. This last summer, I was hiking in the Highlands of Scotland. I've run marathons. I've won a 2-time national marathon champion. I have founded a company that's been able to give over $300,000 to charity in the last 8 years. I've written a book that just came out in October. I've done incredible things that I think, would I have done these if I hadn't gone blind? And I don't know the answer. I mean, my life was on a successful path, but the adversity my blindness created for me, once I chose the right response, became the catalyst for me to learn and grow and challenge myself beyond my expectations. Right? And that is the beauty of those choices and that confidence that built up along the way. Now, it's fine that I've shared this. I want to show you in a moment a video of some of these things, but I kind of want to take a moment and give you some anecdotes of how I got through that process. Right? First thing I had to learn, once you believe, is the how. How do you problem solve? And I'm going to use a problem-solving example. I use it in a lot of the schools I talk to, in grade schools, elementary, high school. And, it's simple, but it's so powerful. My first morning of total blindness, I did something that I hope we all do every day. I brushed my teeth. But it's the first time I couldn't see how much toothpaste was coming out. And it's the first time I couldn't see if it was going onto the bristles of my toothbrush. And that sounds like an easy problem until you try to do it. And the truth of the matter is, more toothpaste came out than I intended, and it went a lot more places than the bristles of my toothbrush. And I was training for my very first guide dog at the time. And my instructor kind of let me in on the secret that toothpaste was where I didn't want it. And I cleaned up, changed my shirt, and I was frustrated. And frustration is an easy part of my journey. I wish I didn't get frustrated, but I do. So now I understand. I try to avoid that frustration. But if I get frustrated, I remind myself that frustration leads to failure. And as quickly as I can, I convert to curiosity. Because curiosity, that gets you to the result you want, right? Reason gets you to the result you want. So what I did is I went and asked somebody who was out at guide school with me, blind all their life. I said, how do you handle toothpaste? And they gave me the easy solution that 19 years later I still use. They said, it's my toothpaste. I put it to my lips. I squeeze it so I can feel it in my mouth, and I know when I have enough, and I stop squeezing. And by the way, it's right where I'm going to use it. So guess what? My bathroom sink at home is cleaner than some of yours. Easy solution. Now, how did I get that solution? What did I do? I started with somebody who already solved the problem, which is exactly the best place to use as a foundation for problem solving. In the case of blindness, there's all sorts of training that exists to help me learn that. But in the case of all of our lives, right, that's why we're in school, to find people who've learned things that we want to do, to use it as our foundation. That's a great place to start. But sometimes we have to go beyond that. Sometimes we pioneer new things because what we want to do may not exist. Like I wanted to climb mountains because when I came out of the wheelchair, the last tool that my occupational therapist gave me when I came out of the wheelchair, I did a lot of things to get out of the wheelchair. 6 initial surgeries, right? Each with 6 weeks of physical therapy. And in that process, she said, I need a single sturdy cane device for him to use. And she put a hiking stick in my hand. If she only knew what she was starting, right? But after I got out of the wheelchair, I always had this thought about maybe someday I could go back to a mountain. And when I got a guide dog who loved the woods, I thought about that a little bit. But I also said, you know, I want to start. Is there somebody who's already hiking blind? And it turns out there is, a guy named Eric Weinmeier, tremendous blind hiker. He's done the 7 summits, the tallest mountain on every single continent, right? That means Everest. And he's a remarkable guy. And he hikes differently than me. He hikes, his guide wears a bear bell on the left shoulder and right hip. And he listens, follows behind his guide, hears those bells, and he uses 2 trekking poles. And he taps the ground behind them as he walks. And he hears the jingling, and he gets some instructions from them, and it works great for him. But that doesn't work good for me. Why not? Eric's 5'8". I am 6'4". And I keep hitting my head on branches when I try that trick. So I could get guides who are taller. That's one solution. Or I could use guide dogs, which are trained to look up as well. And their heads are up in position to look up well. And that's what I tried. And I discovered, pioneering that solution, that my guide dog had a great aptitude. But it wasn't always smooth. Our first mountain was Pac-Monadnock over in Wilton, New Hampshire. And we went up the Wapak Trail. And guide dogs are trained to lead you around obstacles. So he brings me around a couple of obstacles on that trail. And that's the start of it. And then we come to the first big step that you have to take. There's no way around it. And he stops because when guide dogs can't avoid an obstacle, they use intelligent disobedience. They refuse your command to show you that there's something there. And your job is to find why, tap it to let them know that you understand, and then they'll go. So he stopped for this big 3-foot step. Well, 6'4", 36-inch inseam, I can do a 3-foot step. I mean, I wish they built mountains to OSHA standards, but you know, you can't have everything. So I tap it with my cane, and I say, hup up. That's the command that says, go if you can. And he backs up, which is the guide dog answer of, no way, bad idea. So I understand he's never climbed a mountain guiding before. So I tap it again, make sure, and I scan with my hand to make sure I'm not going to hit my head. And I lunge up onto that step, right? Big step up, and bam! I crack my head on a branch the size of my thigh that was just out of my reach, right? And Quinn's wriggling like, I told you, I told you. So I told him he was a good boy. I rubbed my head, and I thought about what I did wrong, right? And what I did wrong is that, you know, I needed to trust the process. He's trained his whole life for how to guide a blind person. I'm hiking my first mountain blind, and I choose to ignore him on the first real challenge? That's a bad idea. Now, it's okay in our lives to challenge a process. But you want to challenge a process, you have good reasons, and you be thorough. And you know, I was hiking with my wife. We had an agreement on how we were going to approach things. And if there was a real danger, she would have warned me, right? But she knows I have a hard head, and my job was to ask her if I was uncertain. And you bet I learned from that. And let me show you. I was on a winter hike, and Quinn and I were hiking along, and winter's easier for me because all the snow fills in all those twisty, rocky, rooty things that make it so hard to hike in New England, right? So I'm hiking along the snow, and Quinn stops. And I look with my foot, and there's nothing there. So I look with my hand, and there's a branch. Good boy, tap the branch so he knows I know it's there. We duck under, off we go. And I'm just proud because, remember, my friends would have walked me into that branch, right? So off we go, and we're walking along, and he stops again. And I look with my foot, nothing. I look with my hand, nothing. So I say, hop up, and he inches forward. And I'm like, okay, look again, nothing. I say, hop up, and he inches forward. And we repeat this a couple of times. And I get frustrated because why is he stopping if there's nothing there? And frustration, as I've discussed, leads to failure. Convert to curiosity. Why is he stopping if there's nothing there? And the best way I can do that, if I want to trust the process, is to be thorough. So I shouted out to my buddy Justin, who's hiking with me, and I said, Justin, can you see why he's stopping? And he says, yeah, there's a branch, but it's like 8 feet ahead of you still. Okay. So I approach that branch. I walk with my hand out, so I'm not going to hit it. And the closer I get to that branch, the more Quinn wags. And as we get really close, he tucks behind me. Like he's excited, but he's behind me, and that's strange. And I'm frustrated with him again because he should have marched me right up to it. That's what he's supposed to do. Frustration is not the response I want. And it turns out Quinn was right again because he had a really good reason. What happened is when I tapped the branch, winter, snow fell off the branch onto his head, and he didn't like it very much, and he said, you're not going to get me with that trick again. So I had to learn from that. And how many times in our lives, right, do we get a response different than what we think? And it's so easy to make assumptions, get frustrated, but it's so much better to get curious and find out why. And obviously my guide dogs, Autumn, Quinn, they can't tell me what's wrong. But often for people, they either may not know or may have reasons why they're not able to share it with us. And we can get as frustrated as we want. But real good communication, real good teamwork involves digging in and finding out why and working together to resolve it. Because once Quinn and I resolved it, the plan was stop for a branch, curl in front of me. I wouldn't tap. I'd reach up, find it, and on we go. Ways to resolve and do the things you want to do, just differently than we normally would have handled it, right? So there's a lot of anecdotes that I've shared. I have a few more to share, but let me stop talking and show you a little bit. Would you flip slide for me?
On December 22, 2011, Randy Pierce and his service dog Quinn began their quest to hike all 48 of New Hampshire's 4,000 footers in a single winter season.
I'm Randy Pierce. I'm a totally blind hiker. If I told you the numbers of people in New Hampshire that are blind, you'd be stunned. It's an invisible malady because when people go blind, all too often, they hide. I had confidence that I would give my all, but I had no confidence that that was enough.
Four more feet. Coming May 2012.
I have a film of a couple of my adventures. I've got several films of a couple of different adventures. It is not, however, very fun to fall off the side of a mountain while wearing a GoPro camera. The good news, at least from my perspective, there's two bits of good news. First, wasn't me that fell, fully sighted friend of mine. Second, he was ultimately okay, right? Now, the reality of this is that, we all take wilderness first aid. It's about risk management, right? I'm not a risk taker, I'm a problem solver. I think a problem solver does everything that a risk taker can do with a lot more success and a lot fewer setbacks. So we prepare for these things. And even in that situation, there was preparation involved, right? I went to Justin, was able to help him out. We continued hiking, he was okay. But we discussed that moment, right? We're on Mount Whiteface, just northeast of Lake Winnipesaukee. And we came to the point where Blueberry Ledges get steep. And I said, I think we should put our micro spikes on. It's something you stretch over the bottom of your boot that gives you a little spike into the ground. And he said, I don't think we need them. Well, I think he believes me now. But why didn't he put his on? He had a good reason. It was cold. And stopping while it's cold means you take your pack off and you dig through and you get more cold. Now, he didn't share that reason because then we could have talked about the risk management of cold versus falling. And we could have made a decision together. But then, even more importantly, I put mine on. We did stop. So what did he do while we were stopped, right? And the answer is maybe he crossed his arms and glared at me, and blind guy, that's not going to do much, right? Glare all you want. But what he really did, right, and what many of us do in situations is we make a decision, we lock our mind to it, and then we stop really listening or really considering. And that's the tragedy. Because if you want to make the best decisions, you've got to find a way to keep your mind open to all the possible information to learn, to grow, to be ready to apply that to the real decisions you need to make. And there's times you have to make decisions with what you have. Great, you do that. If you learn more and you have the opportunity to change, that's what you do as well. But being open-minded is the first key. And for all I say to Justin, every day of my life I had a moment where I'd catch myself, surprising myself, restricting my mind a little bit. But things like that fall remind me. Now, another thing I like about that particular film is the very name of it, right? 4 more feet is a double entendre. Obviously, it's the 4 more feet of my guide dog next to me. It's part of how I do the work. And really to put perspective on the work they do, right? My guide dogs are 24 inches tall, 2 feet, and I'm 6'4". If you were doing their job, what you'd be doing is guiding somebody 15 feet tall, weighing over 700 pounds, with feet the size of a table, up these narrow, twisty trails with drop-offs and water crossings. And by the way, the person you're guiding can't see, you can't speak, if you do your job right, you get a pat on the head and some kibble, right? Now you see why you want your degree. Now you see why you like your job really where it is, right? Although Autumn and Quinn love their job, right? But the reality is it tells you how much they're doing. But there's a perseverance beyond the great work my guide dogs do. We did that winter. In fact, we did it on March 6th, 2012, so not that long ago. We did a Northern Presidential Traverse, which is Mount Madison, Mount Adams, Mount Jefferson, and Mount Washington. You stay on the ridge line. You're above tree line for 8 miles exposed to the wind and weather. And we'd been looking for a weather opportunity because it had been so cold, so challenging. And we finally got a good one. And we went for it. And by the time we reached Washington, it had warmed up that day to minus 27 degrees. And the wind was 50 miles an hour. Now, we were ready for it. We had all the right equipment. But it was still a long, hard hike. The snow was 20 foot deep in Edmonds Cole between Jefferson and Adams. We know that because there's a 20-foot tree that wasn't there, right? So all that hard work, we're approaching the summit, and Quinn's guiding me, and he's confident and leading me away, and I'm getting a little tired. And I stop, and I shout out to Justin, hands on my knees, hunched over. I'm like, how much further? And they were filming it. And the reason they're filming it should be obvious to you as he shouts his answer back to me, 4 more feet. They thought they were going to get this epic shot of the blind guy reaching the summit of Mount Washington on his own, well, with my guide dog, and instead they got the blind guy whining about how tired he is, right? And the funny part is he says 4 more feet, and I'm like, really? 4 feet? That's 1 step for me, right? 1 big step. I suddenly had tons of energy. And why? Right? I didn't eat a power bar. I didn't drink a Gatorade, and neither of them are sponsoring me yet, but if you know anybody, let's talk. But I suddenly had energy, and what changed was my mindset. And the power of our mind to influence things is tremendous, not just psychologically, not just physically, but in our mental work as well. If we want to dwell on what's frustrating us, how hard it's been, how long it's been, that's what we're gonna feel. If we want to think of how close we are to our goals, how rewarding that's going to be, if we put our focus where it belongs, forward, we have more energy. So I always like to think of my goals as 4 more feet away. That's one of the tricks I like to share, but I have a much better one I'm going to share before we're done, right? And to that end, I want to share one more quote, which is, how do we go into all these preparations? You know, and we're entering March Madness, and John Wooten, one of the winningest basketball coaches in college history, he made this quote. He stole it from Ben Franklin, but I liked his phrasing a little better. He said, we don't plan to fail, we fail to plan. And I love that notion. If you want to just try things, you can have some success. You're going to have some setbacks too often, but if you take the time to make a good plan, you're going to have far more success and far fewer setbacks. And that's really how the winter hiking came to be. Now, if you'll flip slide for me, we should have a group of hikers on a summit. And that's the East Cannon Summit. It's not one. Please raise your hand. And I tell them, I've never seen a hand yet. And if they don't do what you just did, I'm in trouble. They've fallen asleep. But of course they've never seen a hand because I'm blind. But of course I've never seen a hand because everybody has challenges. That's just the nature of life. The question is, what are you going to do with your challenge? And this next clip I'm going to share with you is the only other video clip I have for you. My friends came to me. It's kind of a liability of my profession, and said, would you like to do a Tough Mudder with us? And I said, what's a Tough Mudder? It's a 10 to 12 mile obstacle course on really miserable footing with these giant constructs that were originally designed to test British Special Forces. Not really where you expect to see a blind guy. And I looked on the web, and we learned that there was a blind guy in Australia who tried one, right? So we tried to reach out to find out what his challenges and success were. But then we made a plan, right? Plan to fail versus fail to plan for every obstacle. And my team was magnificent. They supported me through everything. We went to Maine, to the Great Northeast Tough Mudder, and succeeded on every one. And ultimately, the Tough Mudder folks, they combined up with Oberto and said, we'd like to fly you out to California, to LA, and film you doing a Tough Mudder, because we think people want to see what you just did. Of course, they're going to have to do it all over again. And then they also, right, they said, we're going to make it harder, too. Every one of these obstacles is going to be a little harder, a little newer, a little bigger, and they're going to add some new ones. I still said yes, because remember rule 3 of goals? Confidence. I know that if things go wrong, I know how to handle it, including failure. I might fail on some of these obstacles, but failure's temporary if you choose a path of persistence and resiliency. I've learned that along the way. So I said yes. And one of the obstacles that they added just to make sure you understand the ludicrousness of what it is, climb 25 feet up a platform. Water down below me, muddy water, of course. Jump out 9 feet and grab a trapeze that's going to swing, and at the end of the swing, let go, and as you're going through the air, ring a bell that's hanging in midair. And by the way, people who are sighted, 1 out of 10 succeed. So we watched as a team and said, where are people struggling, and how can we approach that differently? Let's watch the results. Would you flip slide for me, please?
I am Randy Pierce, and for about 20 years now, I've been totally blind, and that's gonna make this Tough Mudder a little more challenging.
Hand it back, I'll go back. Second round? Oh, okay, you're gonna roll it out.
You know, the truth is, going blind was really hard. I thought everything fun and everything important in my life was no longer possible. And it's just ludicrous to me because now I, climb mountains and run marathons and do Tough Mudders. And our message here really for us is we're out living the life that we believe, right? That there aren't obstacles, there are opportunities.
Tough Mudder, 10.5 miles of just awfulness. Hey! Come away.
Keep moving forward, Randy.
I'm gonna go backwards so I can hop better. I reached up, felt gently, found where the bar was, put my hand not on it so I knew my head wouldn't hit it. Gotcha. Good job, Randy team.
My life isn't about my blindness, it's about the choice I made and how to respond.
Bring your hand down. There you go. That's the swing. I don't feel bad. I gave everything I could. That's my goal every time, right?
The more I invest in life and be in those moments, the more rewards I keep getting. Learning to look at the world differently is the key to really having vision, and vision is always going to be way more important than sight.
Look at this video that's gone viral of Randy Pierce participating in a Tough Mudder challenge, despite being blind. Randy jumped in a trapeze, swung out, and rang a bell only 10% of contestants managed to touch.
Every day of my life, I wish I could see. But I would choose to be blind to learn all the lessons I've learned, to come to this point in my life and have so many great people around me that I wouldn't change it. And blindness, if that's what it took for me to get here and have such a wonderful life, then I welcome it.
Because that's what's helped me grow and use it as a catalyst to do all the things I want to do. I will say this, though. They put one of those shirts, I don't know if you saw, onto my guide dog, Autumn, and I really hope she sees the obstacles or I'm in a lot of trouble, right? Now, all that said, right, doing all these things, that doesn't mean, I'm proud of myself and I love to go out and do these things, but that leads people to believe, right, you're so optimistic that you just overcome everything, and that's not true. I do fail, and I think failure's okay, but I also really, I understand that I have days that I struggle, and I think people need to hear that too. I have days that I get up and I'm like, come on, blind again today, right? Wouldn't it be nice to get up one day and just see for a day? But the trick is, I want to know how to respond to those things, right? Nelson Mandela has a quote. He says, don't judge me by how many times I fall down. Judge me by how many times I get back up. And the truth is, I only like that quote because I don't want to judge a person at all anyhow. What I really want to know is, what's your secret for getting back up? And to me, that secret is momentum. As quick as you can, you either find the strength to get up, or maybe if you built a good team around you, you ask for help to get up. Nobody's around and you need to wait a little while, you do that. But as quick as you can, you find something positive ahead of you, or you make something positive ahead of you. For me, I love a good cup of coffee. Maybe it's a French press in the morning, or maybe it's a call to a friend where I communicate clearly. Hey, I'm having a rough day, and what I'd really love is if you could tell me something positive in your day. right? Because then I'm telling them exactly what I want. I don't want them to also tell me what's bad in their day. Find something positive because momentum builds on itself, and you soon find yourself going where you want to go. I'm going to change directions in the go where I want to go state, and would you flip slide for me, please? And many of you might have heard the news on Sunday, right, about a guide dog team, 3 guide dogs and a blind man running a half marathon in New York. And that was Guiding Eyes for the Blind, right, which is where Autumn and Quinn came from. But here's Quinn and I running. We ran 33 road races together in our time together. And we ran for a lot of reasons, and I don't have time to go into all of that today's presentation. But I hope you appreciate the joy on his face, right? Tongue hanging out, 1 foot on the ground as we're crossing the finish line. And what am I doing? I'm hunched over and tired again. But this is the Boston Athletic Association 5K. 9,800 people ran that race with us. And we're crossing the finish line, and in 2013, same finish line as the Boston Marathon the next day. And I love this photo, right? This is their photo, and it just celebrates that ability awareness message. But I didn't get to celebrate very long when they had this photo because we shared their social media, and then right after that, the bombs went off and ripped that display apart. And the thing is, when people don't learn how to communicate in healthy ways, when we don't learn how to resolve differences in healthy ways, really awful things can happen. And not just on the epic scale like that bombing, but in our everyday lives we do it. We take the frustration and we bottle it up, or we say it to people, when what we really need to do is try to diffuse that, communicate better, build positivity in those relationships. And is it hard? Absolutely. And maybe not everybody's going to get on board with our attempts right away. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't do it, because if we choose to take that, we're going to make our life easier for ourselves and for those around us. And it very quickly builds. Because if you don't, you're going to end up with tension that builds in your life and in your world around you and escalates. And yeah, we hope it never escalates to those levels. But the reality is, why have any of it when there's tools to work around it? Communication, right? And problem resolution with each other. Difference resolution. Easy for me to get frustrated when somebody does something that seems so obviously wrong and unfair to me, but they're not doing it typically because they're trying to be wrong. They're trying to learn, and I need to educate them. And if I choose an aggressive or frustrated response, all I educate them into is that blind guys are cranky, all right? And sure, it may take a lot of work on my part, and I'm not always going to be good, and I'm not going to always have great moments. But you know what? Every time I do it better, the rewards last longer and are stronger. And I know that, and that's my incentive and my motivation behind it. Now, here's the thing. When that happened, I take the life philosophy. So bombs occur, and I say, well, how am I going to respond? I'm a big believer. Have enough accountability to know what went wrong, but put your energy on things you can change, your focus forward. And that's what I did after this. I said, I promised to run the Boston Marathon the next year, 2014, because I wanted to be part of a community that responds with hope, that responds with celebrating the elite human spirit, not just the elite athlete. That's what makes Boston phenomenal, is it celebrates the elite human spirit in many ways. There's great athletes, and there's great stories in every Boston course. So I made that promise, and then I failed, right? And I failed for a really good reason, right? It's a really bad reason, but it's a really good reason. I can be hard on myself, and I'm trying to get better at that. But in this instance, I know my reason, right? My reason is simply this. Quinn had osteosarcoma, bone cancer, on his skull, terminal. And not only was I not going to be able to train with him, and I didn't intend to run the marathon with him, but I wasn't going to leave him behind while I went out to train. So as a result of that, I had a tough decision to make. I let my Boston Marathon go. I didn't need to go out and train for 16 weeks to qualify and then 16 more weeks. That's 34 weeks that I would have been giving, 32 weeks that I'd have been given away that I could be spending with him, and that's what I chose, stay with him. And on January 20th, 2014, my boy took his last breath in my arms. And I kissed my boy on the head, and I said, I have a new promise. I'm going to dedicate this year to you. And that year I ran 2,020 miles for my boy. I ran 4 marathons, including my first to qualify for Boston, including going out and winning my first national marathon championship, and then coming home, would you flip slide for me, and running my first Boston Marathon 1 year late. Failure is temporary if you choose a path of perseverance and resiliency. And you know, I crossed the marathon 3 hours, 50 minutes, and 37 seconds was my chip time. I ran with a husband and wife team, did me a lot of great support. But the real story I love in this, every mile of the marathon I dedicate to someone who makes my life better. My wife Tracy gets mile 1 and 26 because she deserves double. Quinn got mile 20 to 21 because that is Heartbreak Hill, right? Now, I used to say that that weather was the worst marathon weather I'd ever run in, but then I ran last year's Boston Marathon, and I reevaluated that. But that year, in 2015, it was 42 degrees, pretty steady on and off rain, but pretty steady, pouring at Heartbreak Hill, mind you. And the wind was off the ocean. I'm a big guy at 6'4". That means I get a lot of the wind. In fact, people love to run behind me and draft off me. And right, somebody wrote a blog post that my friends pointed me to after the marathon. And what this woman said roughly was this. I was at the base of Heartbreak Hill. I was cold, wet, and miserable and ready to quit when this big guy ran by me with a line of people drafting behind him. And I thought to myself, if I get in that line and let them break the wind and the rain, that I can get to the top of this last hill and maybe I can finish my marathon. And as we worked our way up that long hill, we got to the top. He put his head back into the air, and I don't know how he found the strength, but he shouted into the sky, I love you, Quinn boy. This hill could never break my heart, which of course is what I shouted. And she continued. He then put his head down, and he and his guide sped up and left us behind. And I don't know what made him so strong that day, but I wish I did, and I do. And I told her by email, and I'll tell you now. It's really, right, I love Quinn every day. He's not my purpose every day, but he was my purpose on that hill and that moment and that mile. My purpose every day is reaching and connecting with people. That's what I love, right? I love the rewards that come from people sharing and growing together. But that day was Quinn, and the power of purpose in our lives motivates and drives us so work isn't work. Doctors call it the prescription of purpose sometimes, but find what means something to you and incorporate that into how you do things. Whether it's the motivation behind why you do it, but get it involved. And remind yourself, because even when you're doing that, you often get distracted by the minutiae of the day-to-day. But the core reason is still there, and you just have to revisit it. And I say that just because, sometimes people ask me to come in as an inspirational speaker, and you don't get to choose whether you're an inspiration or not. Other people will tell you whether they find it or not, and that's great if they do. But either way, I'd rather give a methodology for how you approach things. And I'd rather you always find inspiration in yourselves and go seek it out often, because inspiration from outside doesn't last very long. Zig Ziglar used to say inspiration is like bathing. It doesn't last very long, and you better repeat it daily, right? And there's something to be said there. I'm going to have to flip through a couple of slides really quick here to wrap up and have time for a couple of questions. But if you flip slide for me, this is flags on the 48. This is the flag on the top of Mount Liberty. And I shared this one just because there's a program when the towers fell, a couple of hikers climbed Liberty and put up a flag to celebrate all of the first responders, all of the people who do things to enrich our lives behind the scenes. And that's what they did, focus forward, choose the right response to adversity. And we joined it 10 years later and got to hear some powerful stories that I don't have time to share, but I do have time to share the core of the message, which is this. We influence our lives every day with the things we do. But a lot of people, will tell you that when something happens to you, you can choose how to respond to it. And I agree with that. That's empowering. A lot of people will share that. I'll tell you something I think is more important. The choice you make in how to respond to something, that choice will have a bigger impact on your life than the challenge ever could. Even the real serious challenges that, losing Quinn Boy, I'm going to lose him. But how I respond to that was going to affect both our lives more importantly than that loss. And that doesn't mean I grieve less. It's that I wanted to give him all the dignity and grace and love all the way through. And that meant more to him and me. Right? So that's the influence of the choice, even in those hardest times, over the reality. I think life is 10% about what happens to you and 90% how you choose to respond. But I have one big caveat to that I'm going to add at the very end of this. That said, would you flip slide for me, please? Quick look of Quinn in boots. And I share this. I'm sorry, this is Teddy hiking. I apologize. Yeah. So Teddy Bruschi, New England Patriot player. And I share this. I don't know how we scored a touchdown on the trails, but apparently we did. But Teddy and I share a birthday. We built the friendship up. And Teddy, for those of you who don't know, he'd won his 3rd Super Bowl. He went to Hawaii, played in the Pro Bowl, flew home and had a stroke. And in his stroke, he couldn't see out of the right quadrant of his eyes, and he couldn't walk. And he did a lot of things to get himself back on his feet. And he and I talked a lot about that before he wrote his book, Never Give Up. And I love that I was able to have a positive influence because we built a friendship, right? Because at the time that he did that, I was blind and in a wheelchair. I understood his challenges and shared a lot of the stuff with him that I've shared with you tonight. But after he retired, he got asked to do a program with the Wounded Warriors. And very simply, they found soldiers would come back with injuries that they didn't believe in their abilities anymore. And they returned to communities that didn't believe in their abilities, and they wanted to celebrate ability awareness. And they asked Teddy, they said, would you climb Mount Kilimanjaro as a celebrity hiker to raise awareness? Climb with our soldiers to help us raise awareness on what people can do. It's as much as they want to believe. Teddy agreed, and then he called me and said, would you help me learn how to hike, because I've never hiked a day in my life. And I love that this world-class athlete called a blind guy from New Hampshire to learn how to hike. And we had a great experience, and we talked about why he made those choices, because of the teamwork and trust we built in our years of friendship. But ultimately, what I think is more powerful is 2 months later, he went up and climbed to the summit, one of 2 celebrities to make it. And with him was a woman soldier whose shrapnel took her sight. And he was able to help guide her with the stuff he learns. And I think of all the ripples of influence, because for me and Teddy, it all began with an event on our birthday, his rookie year, that I had the courage to wish him a happy birthday. And he came over to talk to maybe the stalker in his mind that shouted out happy birthday. But you know, the courage to just be present and to say positives and put positive things out there has ripples of influence all around you. And you never know where that'll go. If you'll flip slide for me, we have the Grand Canyon. I know it looks like I'm photoshopped, but my wife is there. That is our honeymoon in 2012, 2 years after we got married. And I share this one, not just because it's a beautiful shot, but because we hiked down the Grand Canyon. And it's so much smoother out there than our trails out here. And one of the things that happened is I could actually hike past people. And dogs aren't allowed in the Grand Canyon. And when you're a blind guy passing people, sometimes they get frustrated. And one instance, somebody was like, you know, well, you're not allowed to have a dog here. And I'm like, oh, it's my service dog. I'm totally blind. And they're like, no, you're not. And I was like, what are we going to do? Play the pokey eye game, right? But I understood their frustration because I couldn't envision a blind person doing what I was doing when I first went blind. So of course it might be hard for them to understand. And why I share that with you is because when you're facing challenges, it's so valuable to take stock in how far you've come, how much you've learned. That was my reminder of how far I'd come in the hiking world. But in all of our lives, we've done so much, and we're facing a new challenge, and we're daunted all over again. And we're like, how am I ever going to do this? Well, of course you're going to do it. You've just proven that many times over, right? And use that as your strength and your confidence for the next challenge. Right, if you flip slide for me, now we'll have Quinn in boots, right? Sorry about that. You're going to take care of your team. And I show this because it's going to be hard work, and you're going to have tough terrain. That's a lot harder. I've got to scramble up that. And look at the worry on Quinn's face for me, right? Right? And I'm taking care of him because his paws could have gotten cut until we started running, and his pads became hard. And then he didn't need the boots anymore. That's the Ammonoosuc Ravine Trail, July 4th, 2012, going up Mount Washington. Now, flip slide for me, please. And there's a split screen, and you see how much easier winter hiking is for me. And on the other side, we're on Mount Willie, and I show that because they have the famous Willie ladders. It's a steep ladder that descends a couple of 100 feet. You get off one ladder onto the next on a cliffside. And you know, 100 feet to drop off. We passed people that were traversing it the other direction, and they would whisper to my hiking companions, "You can't take the blind guy down those ladders." And I'd be like, "Hello, I can hear you." But we didn't plan to fail to plan. We didn't just go see if we could go down those ladders, right? We'd practiced. And we didn't practice with a 100-foot drop in front of us. And what we learned is if I tried to do it with my guide dog, it was too big a risk. My guide dog could do it alone, and I could do it with my hand on the pack of a human. So we switched. The right guide for the right occasion is the lesson I take away from there and share. Flip slide for me, please, and we have Autumn. Because she's been saying, "Quinn, Quinn, Quinn, when do I get my slide?" Well, the reality is the guides in our world are going to change. And if we lock our mindset that people and pups in our worlds, when they change, that we want them to be what previous people and pups were, we might get disappointed and we might lose opportunity. Autumn is a joyous, loving bundle of energy. And she is a sweet girl. And she does her guide work that she needs to do and brings me that. Quinn was a great guide and a serious competitor. Loved me dearly, but he was a serious competitor. And Autumn doesn't like to run. I have to be open to where she's different. I can't force her to be his role. And by doing that, I get the gift of her joy and her love, which is just incredible and a great part of my life. Now, interestingly enough, that's that open-minded notion. But I think the most important person we have to be open-minded about is ourselves. Because you know what? We can become new. if we're willing to let ourselves. And often we stymie ourselves, and I've never done that, so I can't. Well, be open-minded to your growth and be patient with others as they come to see that you're growing and changing to whoever you want to be, the author of your own story, I like to think. So last thing I'm going to do before I go to the next slide is the one thing that I haven't been able to do as a blind person is see. And I tell people that all the time, but I do something better. And if you'd heard the Tough Mudder video, you'd already have the foundation for this, but nevertheless, I even think I can see. July 4th, 2010, when we climbed Mount Washington, you saw the Amanuensis Ravine Trail picture. We get up above tree line to the Lake of the Clouds hut, and it faces west, and 90 people stay in this hut, and 300 days a year, bad weather. That day, beautiful weather. And so we all went out to watch a sunset together. And as we watched this sunset looking west, there are 7 mountain ranges that run south to north up there. And right up close, you had the Bonds, and then you had the Lafayette Ridge. And as you go further out, you get into Vermont, and they start to look smaller, but they're still 4,000-foot peaks. And you get way off on the horizon, because you're so high, you can see that far away. There's tiny mountains. They're the Adirondacks in New York State, also 4,000-foot peaks. And as the sun is setting, the angle of the sun changes the colors so that those distant Adirondacks looked purple, just like the song for Purple Mountain's Majesty. And those hills of Vermont had a bluish tint to them. You know, this is all being described to me, obviously. And up close, you have the lush green mountains nearby with stark gray cliffs. And in the sky were these thin, wispy clouds. They don't block the sun. They're cirrus clouds. They capture it resplendently. So there were streaks of crimson red at times. There were times there was streaks of orange like an oak leaf in the fall. And at other angles, it was pinks and purples before it faded into the night. And it was just so majestic and splendid. The emotions were palpable. And people all around me, the 90 were, except in describing, were as silent and respectful and in awe. Right? And thank you for the silence and respect you've given me tonight. But here's the thing. I want you to break that. What I want you to do is if the next question applies to you, say yes. If a yes is not right, please be silent. But here's my question. Did any of you picture that scene? How? You didn't see it, and I didn't see it, right? You used your imagination. Your mind puts images together. Your eyes are only one way you can do it. It's vision, right? It's different than sight. Sight lets you see everything that's around you right now. I can't do that. Vision is sight done differently. It's looking at the world mindfully, deliberately, and it comes with some bonuses because you not only get to see the world around you, you get to see all the possibilities it can become and ways that you can influence and affect them. You don't have to have sight to have vision, but you don't get vision because you have sight. You get vision because you choose to look at the world differently, mindfully, deliberately. Flip slide for me, please. That's just one moment of that scene. 3 slides left. Flip slide for me, please. Remember that 0.5 reason? 3.5, I 8.5? This is the 0.5. This is the gray J magic, I call it, the magic on the path. When you're invested, when you're setting goals and striving out there doing things, things are more likely to happen to you that you didn't expect that aren't going to happen when you're not out there. You know, for me, I learned how to program a computer and make a website back in 1996 using a screen reader. I ended up, as a result, in the Pro Football Hall of Fame in Canton, Ohio. That's crazy. Don't have time for that story, but I was climbing a mountain, and I have a bird landing in my hand and eating out of my hand like a Pixar film or a Disney film. And that's magical. And just as a proof of the magic of it, the gentleman in that picture, Ben Becker, he's a friend of mine who likes to think of himself as a tough guy, a manly man, never show emotion. You tell me that's not awe and wonder on his face, right? That's what happens when you're invested. You're going to get things that are rewarding moments more commonly because you choose to be following those goals, right? Flip slide for me, please. I told you my favorite photo, or the second favorite photo, so this is my favorite photo. It turns out this would be the last hike I would ever take with Quinn. We didn't know about his cancer yet. We learned shortly thereafter. But what I love is the comfort in his environment, the dedication and devotion on his face as he's looking at me in this photo. And I love that I have that captured so purely on such a wonderful moment with him. And though I've never seen it, I have a great vision of it and a great vision of what the rewards are for the dedication and devotion we shared with each other and to the tasks we pursued. Next to the last slide, flip that for me, please. That's the summit of Kilimanjaro. And the sun is rising, and you see the curvature of the earth, and I'm tired. I've been up for 2 straight days because I couldn't sleep, but I'm reflecting. On reaching a peak is wonderful, but you're not done, right? First, you got to climb down. But what a great vantage point to reflect on the rest of your world. And to that end, I want to take a moment and do a little reflecting with you and give you a moment for a few questions. We don't have a lot of time, but we have some time for a couple of questions. So to that end, I want you to realize that raising your hand's probably not going to work. So I do have Stephanie Ames helping me out a little bit. If you have a question or two for me, we'll take some time for it.